Hello. This is a Q&A because I got an email from Jesse, and he is a newer player. He's attended his first tournament, and he got hooked. He wants to run a tournament for himself. Um, Jesse, that's an awesome idea. And you had a lot of questions, and I thought everyone could benefit from me answering those. So here goes. This is a Q&A on how to do a pack, and I'm going to start by answering Jesse's questions, and then at the end I'm going to give my collected response for what I would do if I had to start again. So let's go. I wanted to run a game where this is not a game; it's a tournament, by the way, with a custom set of rules. I guess you guys call them packs. Yes, I don't actually know why they're called packs, but they are called the pack for a tournament. All tournaments have packs, even the ones who don't. That's a pack in itself. A pack is the limitations that the organizer, the tournament organizer, called the TO, sets up for the day. And that can include points limits for how many points you can bring, selector types, which types of selectors you can bring. So you can maybe only bring Western Desert selectors or whatever. It can include a dice cap, which is a cap on how many dice you can bring. Both the lower end and an upper end, although the lower end you don't typically see that. Um, it can also include a description of the event, what type of event it is, whether it is a casual tournament, whether it's a competitive tournament, whether it's just a rivet counter hobby day, whatever. Like you should include some of that in most packs do note down what it is. Many packs, although I think too many packs, note down that this is a casual competition. A casual competition for me is not a thing, and for many competitive players is not a thing. Um, for me, I would rather that people say this is not a tournament if they don't want it to be competitive. Um, so you can have free games and you can have prizes and whatever, but don't call it a tournament if you don't want people to compete for winning those prizes, because some of us do want that, and I do attend events that are not competitive as well, but I really want people to tell me in advance when it's not competitive. So event type can be very important for somebody like me anyways. Many packs also include the missions that are going to be played. This is a really nice touch for people who like to repair. um, so you might at least just mention that you're going to use the rulebook missions or whatever, or the specific missions that you want to run. Um, they will also typically include special rules that if there are some aspects of the rules that you want to change, and Warlord Games actually encourages this. They want TOs to set up their own set of rules for what they want to see at their day, at their event, because it's the tournament organizer. It's their event. It's not Warlord Games' event. Warlord Games doesn't tell you how to play this game. Um, and I got this confirmed again and again by Marcus Vine of Warlord Games in my interview with him just a few days ago. So uh, that is the thing. They want the TOs to have any special rules that they feel are appropriate and fun. Um, so you can change the game in ways that you think you want to do that, and that includes banning certain things. Many tournaments have a cap on the number of flamethrowers or multi-rocket launchers, or like some unit types, the dakka Stuart, or maybe Gurkhas, or engineers. So there are certain types of units that some TOs feel like they want to limit in order to create the environment they want for their event, and that is the band's part of a pack, which many packs include. So Jesse's initial thoughts are a single platoon, generic reinforced, and it's 1250 points. Now, a single generic platoon, that would encourage people to bring a broad spectrum of different units, which I sort of like, but it also limits you into certain unit or army builds that are the only ones that can be done with single platoons. Many army builds require double platoons, and you're excluding those army builds, which can be a good idea, just as long as you're aware of that's what's happening. And if you have a single platoon and you set it at 1250, which is a little bit high, it will mean that players have a lot of points to spend. That will encourage them to bring expensive units and discourage them from bringing inexpensive units because they have to fill out those 1250 points. If they're not doing that, then they're ending up with like points left over. That would be horrible. No competitive player wants to do that. So this pack will mean that you won't see spam armies of inexperienced hordes, which can be a good thing. It at 1250, if you're only having a single platoon, you're also basically encouraging a little bit more expensive tanks because you have only one tank selection slot. So you're going to have, as a player, you're going to have to fill that out somehow. And yes, you might see some players filling it out with a dakka Stuart, but since you only have one tank selection, um, you are going to see players who have that many points left over that they can buy something more expensive than a Darker Steward. And then the Darker Stewards become a little bit less favored because you want to spend the points. And at the same time, if somebody is buying more expensive tanks, then the Darker Steward becomes threatened by those expensive tanks. So it pushes the meta a little bit when you're doing this, which is a good thing. It always encourages players to think again. Are there any changes that you think would help unit types which struggle? Yes, there are. You mentioned yourselves LMGs and medium or heavy tanks. I think the pack that you're proposing in itself would encourage medium or heavy tanks a little bit more, but I still think that medium or heavy tanks could benefit from a small discount. I would maybe consider cutting 10% off the cost of medium or heavy tanks. That is all tanks that are 9 plus in armor. Simply because it encourages you to bring those tanks. So that would be an idea that you could work with. I would also encourage you to read the Juggernaut Bolt Action groups. Their pack, what's called the Jugger Pack. In that pack, they actually hand out free LMGs, which is a nice idea if you want to make LMGs more worth it. So you can do that. Have LMGs just be handed out for free, basically. And they hand them out specifically if you have full strength units, which again is something you encourage as in your pack, because you have that many points to spend. So a lot of players will be buying full strength, full sized units. And if you're buying a full strength unit of 10 men, getting that extra free LMG, okay, I would take it then. Of course, I would consider buying, and it would also encourage people to buy full strength units instead of having those 5 to 6 man units that you typically see in many cases. As I'm sitting here, I didn't think of it when I made the PowerPoint, but as I'm sitting here, I think there's one more change that you might consider, and that is MMG teams, infantry teams with MMGs are really bad. Nobody uses them. And you could do one simple thing to them that might encourage people to use them more, and that is removed fixed for them. One of the problems of MMG teams is that you can't move and fire. And they are a little bit overcosted as well at the same time. But if you just remove fixed, that would encourage people to use them more, especially because it's in all generic reinforced platoon selectors have the access to a medium machine gun, but nobody brings them. So that would encourage it, and at the same time, with the extra points that you have, that would also encourage it. So I think that might actually be an idea that I would add to this as well. What price points begin to make sense, in your opinion, on light machine guns in squads? Same for light mortars. For me, 20 points as they are costed now is almost worth it in some cases for light mortars. Almost. For light machine guns, definitely not. I would much rather, because what they actually give you is 2 extra shots for those 20 points. Because you already have 2 shots on the 2 guys that are going to service the machine gun. And they had rifles before, and now they don't. So what you're buying for your 20 points is 2 extra shots. For those 20 points, you might get 2 extra men, which is 2 extra bodies in your unit that can fight in close combat, that can take casualties, and that can't be sniped out. LMGs at 20 points make no sense. If they were 10 or 11 points, and I'm going to argue for 11 points in a second, that would make sense, because you can buy light machine guns for some vehicles for 10 points. So I think they should be costed at 10 points. Then I think, and that would make the point value for each shot that you get extra would be a 5-point value, which is a little bit high in some respects, but it's okay. I would argue 11 points because you're then also gaining a little bit of extra range, which is nice. So you're paying that 1 point for the extra range. For me, 11 points is where LMGs should be costed. Light mortars, they can be okay in units as they are. I think they should be costed around 15 points. That is where a competitive player like me would start considering bringing them. So I think they are actually worth it most of the time, but a little points reduction would make it definitely worth it for me, and that would be my suggestion. So, yeah. Do you think that above a certain number of machine gun shots, there should be an increase in price for vehicles, i.e. the dakka Stuart? No. And yes, I think it should be the other way around. I don't think you should have an increase in what a dakka Stuart should cost, but I do think that there should be a discount on heavier tanks, non-machine gun tanks. I think that there's something wrong with the way that Warlord Games has price set their tanks. I think that what they're actually doing is that they're uh, um, taking the armor and then adding the main gun caliber and then a fixed price for any machine guns. So they're adding that up, and that gives you a certain price range, I think, in points, which means that Stuarts, which are lightly armored and have a light AT gun, are very, very cheap compared to something like a Panzer IV, which is very expensive for what it actually does, right? Because it only has that one shot. Whereas when you're rolling more dice, you're hitting more things, you're killing more things. So the way Warlord Games has price set this in points is off. It doesn't work out in the game itself, which I think should be a discount for the tanks that doesn't have a lot of machine guns. Actually, I think that's the way to go. Yeah. Would it be sensible to remove free units? Well, I had that interview with Marcus Vine of Warlord Games, and he repeated, as have been stated many times by Warlord Games as well, that Warlord Games never meant for Bolt Action to be a balanced game. It was never meant to be a competitive game. It wasn't built for that. It wasn't built to be balanced and every nation should have a chance. It was built for funs and giggles, basically. It does have mechanics that are highly suited for competitive gaming, but the game itself was never built originally for that. So right now, as the game is built, my answer would be a clear, resounding no. The free units are something that that is built into the game. I don't think you should change that. If you're starting to change that, you're starting to build a whole new game as well. However, you might consider limiting it, because the most egregious um, thing that free units does is, in low point games, which is not what you're considering doing, they skewer the field enormously, right? Imagine that you're playing a 750 point game, and I am playing British Indians from the Western Desert Book. I am bringing 950 points to that 750 point game then, because I get a free Indian infantry unit, and I get a free artillery observer for being from the British Commonwealth. Those are worth 100 points each. So that makes no sense. That's insane. But when you get to the higher point games, then it doesn't really matter that much. Then um, some armies, Japanese for instance, get a lot more value from their national special rules than just free units, because if you're calculating Japanese, 3 points per infantry model, that is fanatic. If you're having 1250 points, you can easily stick in 100 Japanese inexperienced soldiers. 3 points for them each, that's 300 points. Um, so you're playing with 1550 points when you're playing Japanese, right? So the free things that you get, they don't matter as much, because everyone gets them, a lot of free stuff when you're playing high point games. When you're playing low point games, they matter enormously. Um, so I think you might consider, and this is the worst and most egregious point, is the Indian Commonwealth nations for the Brits, right? The easy fix for this is to limit each army to having one free unit per army, if they're allowed any free units at all. So that would be my suggestion. Just write out in your pack, if your army allows you to bring a free unit, you can bring one free unit per army. That's it. Do you guys actually use the communication breakdown trait? I haven't used it. I'm not even sure what it is. So no, not a lot. Just part of the questions that Jesse asked. Officers in BA suck. Yes, unless you're really good at using them in the correct way, they become highly situational. Yes, I agree. And for me, they suck. I don't actually use them. They're attacks for me. I propose giving them officer traits. That sounds really cool. It sounds really cool, really fun. If your event is going to be a casual, non-competitive event, go right ahead. If you're going to run it competitively, I wouldn't advise it. And that is simply because if you're going to look to Warhammer, for instance, 40k, and look at what you can do with officer traits, but you might also look at other games that have specific traits for the officers. Right now, I'm reading Age of Hannibal by Little Wars TV. They have specific officer traits, and you roll for it. So it's a die roll what you get. That is not something that competitive players enjoy most of the time. That randomness is not something that they enjoy. So unless you start price setting each trait, then I wouldn't do it for competitive gaming. But it sounds very fun, and something that I think could definitely be a part of a version 3 of the rules. Yes. Collectively, my advice for rookie TOs is this. 1. Do not overthink the pack. If this is your first tournament, there's going to be all kinds of other stuff that's difficult for you. Just checking the lists can be really difficult, and I think you should do that very, very thoroughly, so that people don't get upset that you've allowed something that's actually not allowed in your pack. Check the lists. Once you've checked the lists, say these lists have been checked, they are approved by the TO. Any mistakes in them are now official and approved. Don't go as you're at the event and have one player come up to you and say, "Oh, this is not allowed in your own pack. It says so right here." Then you say, "Well, it's allowed because I approved everything." But please don't overthink the pack, because that is spending too much time on the pack. Use something that is pretty simple, that you know how to run, and that you can check the lists for. So that's the first thing. Don't overthink the pack. Next thing, be strict. You are the judge at this event, but you should also be fair. So try to give assessments when you will be called over to judge situations. And what I always say is, have you checked the rule book? If you haven't checked the rule book, check the rule book, and then come back to me if you're still not in agreement. If they come back to you after they've checked the rule book, the players that have an argument, just state what you think the rule should be, what it feels right to you. And then they have to play that. No arguing, that's it. Because at that point, you're just there to make sure the game goes on. You're not there to check the rule books for them. That's not what you're doing. You're just there as the TO saying this is what you're playing. And then we can discuss afterwards and figure out what the rules are, what's right and what's wrong. But as you are there, be strict, be fair, set the boundaries, set the rules, and then move on. Because your job as a TO is to make sure that everyone has fun and that the games run smoothly. It's not to figure out the rules. That is definitely not your job. You've set out the pack, you set out the rules in advance, and please, I deal with this at all my tournaments. Let the players ask you questions and then answer them, and do so in a collected manner. I make a Facebook group for my tournaments, and I have a FAQ posted at the top of that Facebook group where all the questions that players ask, with the answers, I just note them all in. And that's a good idea because players have questions for the pack. I would also recommend you not to play yourself. I have By now I've TO'd many tournaments, and I can play at a tournament that I'm TOing, but it isn't good. I'm pretty much too busy to actually give my opponent a fair game. So if you're an unequal number, then yes, you may have to play, but I would rather that you find someone else to do it, and that you yourself do not play, because you will have plenty to do, believe me. The matchups and the scoring, use the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. Don't overdo it the first time. You will be overwhelmed by the stuff that you have to do as a TO. Don't overdo it. Don't overdo the pack. Don't overdo the matchupping. Don't overdo the scoring. It has to be as simple as possible for the first time you're TOing. Then you can complicate it down the road. But for the first time, keep it as simple as possible. I would go with win, draw, loss. And then for the secondaries, I would just go by kill dice. That's the first thing. Then as soon as you get better at TOing, you can go and get all kinds of weird stuff and have like extra objectives and whatever, secret missions, all of that. But for the first time you're doing it, keep it very, very, very simple. And then for the matchups, I always do Swiss matchup where the winners of the first match, they face off against each other, and then I try to make sure that people who face off against each other are actually in the same place in the tournament. The only thing that you have to make sure that when you do that is that you don't want players to face the same player twice. So if that happens, let players say, "Oh, I already played against Michael. Can I like switch to someone else?" Yes, certainly. Wait a minute, John, you're playing against Ross because he already played Michael, and then you switch, right? And do the same with the tables as well. Say to the players as you start, right, these are the tables. I've numbered them, and I will give you your number when we start playing. if you've already played on that table, ask the guys next to you if they want to switch. That's perfectly fine. And the final thing I would advise is to communicate a lot at the event. Communicate what time is there a break, when do the games start, when do the games finish. I always have like half an hour before the games stop. I would say half an hour left, gentlemen, 15 minutes left, and then that was the final die that was drawn out of the bag. Stop the game as soon as this die has been played out. The game is over. That is the end, gentlemen. That communication becomes key for everything running smoothly and running on time. So that was my advice for rookie TOs. I hope you could use this, Jesse, and good luck. Let me know how it turned out if you do this. And if you ever have the pack collected and want it featured on the channel, send it to me. I will talk through it gladly. That's it. Cheers.